I think we're live. I always have to double check it because my computer screen says we're live, but I also see like the little thing in the window. Yeah, we're live for 6 seconds now. Like I get like a little buffering signal, and I don't really know what's going on. Um, but we're live. Awesome. You know, if I'm honest, when I wake up Monday morning, on the day we have a live stream, I'm like, oh, we got a live stream tonight. It's gonna be a long day. But then once I'm sitting in here, and I've got like you guys or whoever, and I'm like,
There's an energy.
Yeah, we get to live stream.
Yeah. I just left karate with my son. And so that's like usually the last thing of my day karate. And then I go home. And then that's it.
Do
And
you do the
so-
karate too?
No.
Okay.
No, I read a book and
I
my son
gotcha.
does karate. And it's like, the whole. And then when I get home, my day's over. So this is like, I told my wife, this is a little push for me, a little
There you go.
extra push
There you go.
at the end of my Monday, but I'm here for
I
it.
had do you watch Seinfeld?
Oh, yeah.
I had a vision of you like Kramer when he was taking karate and just beating up on all the little kids. It's like, oh my God. All right, so we're up and running. Hey, if you guys are joining us live on Facebook, thank you. This is the Parents Helping Parents roundtable discussion. We have a professional therapist, we have a professional parent, and we're going live. We're taking your questions. We're going to be talking about really kind of focusing on success and recovery tonight. So thank you for joining us. As this is your first time, I want to encourage you to do a couple of things. Go to our Parents Helping Parents website, www.parentshelpingparents.info, so that you can get like the lowdown on everything that Parents Helping Parents does. And also make sure if you're seeing this shared somewhere, make sure you follow us on social media, on Facebook, at Parents Helping Parents Inc., to get that information. So Parents Helping Parents is a Oklahoma-based nonprofit organization with a really simple mission: caring parents, offering resources, education, and shared experiences. I feel like I didn't say that right. I didn't pull up.
Did very well.
I didn't pull up my paper today. I thought I could wing it, and apparently I can't wing it. Parents Helping Parents. Here's what it really is in layman's terms. It's a group of really loving parents who want to help you if you have a child any age that's struggling with substance use disorder. They're parents who have been down that road and been through the game, and they want to share their stories. They want to help connect you with resources. They want to offer some education, and that's what we do. So they host some chapters throughout Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, Norman, Edmond, Tulsa,
Correct.
Wichita still, maybe? No?
Not currently.
Not
no.
currently, yeah.
No.
So that's why you should go to the website to get all that current information. So they host some live chapters. I mean, everything's virtual right now because of pandemic stuff. But they've got chapters. They host meetings. They do all kinds of great things. I want to tell everybody, as an organization, Parents Helping Parents has no professional expertise. We've simply walked in the shoes of a loved one and struggling families. So any outreach that Parents Helping Parents does should never be a substitute for professional counseling, legal services, medical services, all of which we really think you should get if it's appropriate for your need. Now, luckily, we do have some professional experience in the room with us tonight. So we're here for Parents Helping Parents to offer our perspective and our story, and Mason is here to help us with the clinical aspects of that conversation. So everybody, do me a quick favor. If you're watching live, reach up, click the share button so that this goes onto your feed. People don't really understand that like automatically exponentially increases our exposure on social media. Not because we want the likes, not because we're fundraising or anything like that, because we want families and parents to hear the message of hope and of change and of recovery. So if you love people, hit the share button. If you don't hit the share button, then obviously you don't love people. And we hope that you hear the message and can find some change tonight. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, if that's all right. Just kind of tell people who you are and maybe why you're here tonight. And then we'll just kind of see what happens. We'll ebb and flow right in.
Kirk Morrison. I've been volunteering for Parents Helping Parents for about 8 or 9 years now. Just through my own experience with my own loved one, I saw the need of helping and supporting other parents and being able to give back. And now I enjoy volunteering for our group and chasing my grandson around on days I get to babysit with him. So,
That's a good life.
yeah.
Thanks for being here, Kurt.
I'm Mason Phillips. I'm a marriage and family therapist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I practice at a 90-day rehab facility called Arcadia Trails with Integris over in Edmond. And I also run a private practice that serves the Edmond and Oklahoma City area. I just recently moved my private practice into Edmond, and all that's on my website.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I'm Googleable. You can find me, but I think the best way to find me is either on Facebook, which is just Mason P. Phillips, LMFT, CHT, and on Instagram, mason.lmft.hypnosis.
Sweet. Why did you decide to move your practice?
It was
Closer to
better,
home?
yeah,
Yeah.
way better, way closer to home, way
Okay.
less stress, and I
Okay.
was getting a lot of people in that area. So
Yeah. Hey, I get it. Are you sharing office space, or you kind of got
Yeah,
your own little spot?
it's my own room, but
Okay.
there's more activity going on
Okay.
in
Sweet.
there. Yeah,
Cool. Congratulations. man.
thanks.
So we kind of bounce around a lot of different topics when we do these things, but something that's really been on my mind that I wanted to talk about tonight was success in recovery. And what does that mean? How do we achieve it? How do we measure it? How do we not get too deep in that rabbit hole where it gets confusing? Does all that make sense?
Yeah. Honestly, I would just say, so I don't know if you had any thoughts right off the bat, but my immediate reaction is how much that is a phrase, that success and recovery, that phrase is so tied into identity. Because people who have success and recovery, whatever that means, that is their identity. I'm a person in recovery, and I have this number of years, and then accidentally that number of years becomes inextricably tied to their identity. And so if they start to struggle for a couple months because it is this disease that they get kind of waver into gully in some way, then they suddenly have a crisis of identity. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I don't know. That's the first thing that came to mind is when somebody says having a lot of success in recovery, the first word that comes to my mind is identity. So I was just going to make it really controversial right away.
Now I'm going to come back to that
Okay.
because I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'd say for me as someone that's had a loved one that struggled, success in recovery. Part of that's you have to be actively pursuing a recovery lifestyle. Myself, as somebody that's concerned about a loved one, but I also realized my loved one had to have their own recovery, and they had to do it their way. And I could support that, and I could also interfere with it. So I had to allow my loved one to have the dignity to have their own recovery their way. I let them know I loved and supported them and would support recovery. And whatever that may look like, whatever the need may have been during their recovery period. But I think acknowledging that I had my own recovery and my loved one had theirs, and a separation there.
Were there times where I'm going to make some assumptions?
Go ahead.
If I'm assuming wrong, just call me an ass and we'll move on. And my mom and dad will laugh because they've told me that my whole life. That's what happens when
Or
you assume.
fictionalize it and it makes them look really, really good.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Whatever works. As a family member, you've got your own recovery.
Definitely, yes.
Your addicted family member has their own recovery. Your spouse has their own recovery.
Correct.
Were there scenario in you guys' stories where only one or two of those three were being successful while the other two or one continued to struggle?
Yeah, that was true. We all had our periods of where we progressed or moved forward. Then there's times some of us would struggle, but as a family, the start for us was meeting with a professional like Mason, a counselor, and giving each other the space and dignity. We told our loved one that we would support his recovery, whatever that may look like, but also realize he may have backslide, so to speak. not necessarily relapse, but some of his old ways of addictive thinking, maybe. We would understand that and give him space to, once again, like I said, the dignity to have his own recovery. So.
Yeah. Let's go back to this identity thing that you mentioned, Mason, because I think that's really important. As you were describing that, I got the sense that that could be a really dangerous thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I think happens, because I see this all the time, and I think you have too, where people will have like 10 years of continuous sobriety, which in the AA community is like, I mean, the chips start looking really, really cool at that point. You know, so to go get your 10-year chip, I mean, that's a big deal, and this is a thing that's in people's lives that they have to manage. It's not necessarily like I think when recovery centers like Arcadia Trails, I mean, we had this conversation in our staff meeting. We're only a year and a half, almost 2 years old as a treatment center, and we had an entire clinical team meeting where we were like, we've got to stop hosting graduation ceremonies. Because what exactly are they graduating from? I mean, they're passing from this place to the community, which is wonderful. And so we're going to say nice things to them, and
Right.
exhort them and encourage them, and we've got a little cool arrowhead just as a reminder of their time there. But I mean, we stopped with like the certificates and the pomp and circumstance of it all.
Yeah.
Because what exactly are they graduating? I mean, it's not like, you know what I mean?
Do you feel it causes an undue pressure on them?
Absolutely.
Or having a chip of so many days or time frame?
That exact phrase was used by so many people, like this pressure that they have to, like, they don't want to disappoint all of us. I don't want that to be a reason why somebody is sober. I don't want me to be the reason somebody is sober.
Is there, just to play devil's advocate,
Yes.
is there a little bit of power in that though, that you don't want them you don't want them to disappoint the treatment center and the people that have been there and shown up and supported them? Because can that at certain times be motivating?
Yes. Power sustained for how long, though? I mean,
Yeah.
they know me for 90 days, and then I'm not their outpatient therapist.
Yeah.
And we don't continue to have a relationship afterwards because of ethics. So, I want them to know that this is a continuous thing. I think it was in the Anonymous People, great documentary.
Great documentary.
Go
You seen
watch.
that?
I have not.
It's good.
You can it's pretty cheap to rent on like Amazon Prime. I bought it, so we won't have a watch party. But I mean, there's this part where this woman is talking about at the end of her breast cancer treatment, she's walking out of the elevator and she sees this massive sign that says, "How can we help you with your continued recovery?" Massive sign goes all the way down the hallway. And she thought, why isn't that happening more in drug and rehab treatment centers, where it's like this continuous, how can we help you with your continued recovery? Because we've had so many people come and be like, I had 10 years of recovery. I don't know what, something just got squirrely, and it is so hard for them to, after you've been to that 10-year chip ceremony and gotten that really cool chip or whatever it is, there's a million different versions of what the chip ceremony is, that it's really hard to surrender that. And because it's tied up into your identity. I mean, it does have to become the tenets of it have to become a part of who you are. I'm an open-minded person. I'm an honest person. I'm a willing person. But to say I'm a person with 16, 15 years of sobriety, it's a scary identity to have if you have a couple squirrely months. I mean, so who do you become then? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, 100%. Kirk, from a parent perspective, how did you and your wife view or look at your son or daughter's success as they were moving through recovery? Like, how would you guys define that as a parent? Hey, I view treatment as successful and I view recovery as successful if they're fill in the blank.
You know, I could tell my loved one was doing well when his actions met his words. Because when they were struggling, everything was skewed or manipulated or controlling. And just to see them follow through with, you know, they had a plan of going to school or treatment recovery, whatever their plans may have been, and to see them follow through on that, for me, that was a success for them. And I could tell they were on the right path at that point. So, and once again, giving them the space to make those choices, whether it be physical space or emotional space. I think that was important for my wife and I and our family. So, yeah.
So we're gonna play a game. I've been watching a ton of Family Feud.
I love it.
Yeah, that's like me and my wife's like, we're going to bed. Let's turn on Family Feud on the Game Show Network. If we were playing Family Feud, and the question was that question that I asked, success in recovery is blank. What would the top 5? You polled 100 people. What would the top 5 things be?
One, whether it be myself or my loved one, actively going to support groups that
Okay.
fit your need.
Active in support groups.
Okay. I would say honesty.
Honesty. Okay.
Helping others, which works wonders both ways.
Some sort of giving back or engagement in giving.
Deep healing.
Healing.
Yeah, a spiritual or higher power, however you look at that, a connection there.
Okay.
Spirituality. Yeah.
So
And it wouldn't necessarily be sobriety.
that's my point.
Yeah.
Is in the top
Yeah.
5, none of us felt
Yeah.
the huge need to include sobriety. Why is that? Like, what does that mean?
Well, when you said when my loved one's words met his actions, the word that I wrote down was congruence. I was thinking of, and I've talked to my people a lot about this. You know, often we'll be talking, we'll be having a session, and I'll just have to stop them and say, "Now, hang on, you're not being congruent right now. You're totally incongruent with what you're saying and what you said earlier, and what you're saying now is not congruent." And the way you're acting is not congruent with that, you know. And so there's this lack of congruence, and I think most people in recovery would say, as long as as long as I have a space, so a support group, whether that be a support group or your therapist, your sponsor, someone, some mentor, someone in your life that you're checking in with and telling on yourself with, you know, and checking in on. I think that you know, I've heard it many times said, and I think this is true about myself also in my life, is I know that things are getting worse or getting more squirrely if I'm not being honest anymore, even with myself, whether that be in my journal or even with the people closest to me. If I'm not being 100% honest with them, things are going a little awry. If I'm starting to if I'm holding back on them in some way, you know. So when I lose that. And so for most people in recovery, that's going to be some kind of support group like AA or NA or CR or SMART, something like that they can go. And they're just saying, so this is everything that happened in the last week that I did, and I need to tell on myself. When that stops, I think that incongruence starts. And when we're incongruent with ourselves, we lose our identity.
Yeah. So where does sobriety fit in? Are we too... This conversation has not actually. I kind of figured we would talk about sobriety, but not this quick and this deep. Like, do we put too much pressure on people in recovery to maintain a certain level of sobriety in order to call that success?
I think with my loved one, there was a lot of pressure. You just imagine you do wonderful for 364 days out of the year. You've set this example before, and then there's that one day you have a slip up. Why are we so focused on that one mishap instead of majority of the year being wonderful, you know.
Yeah.
So I realized with my loved one's treatment and his recovery, he had some missteps, and we just let him know that we were still loving and supporting of him, and he would find the best way to move forward. And he was in a good place. We're in a good community. Had a lot of good people around him. So those families that are listening are maybe brand new to this. Don't beat yourself up for having mistakes with your own recovery, but even if your loved one. I mean, come from a place of love, care, listening, trying to understand how they feel, what prompted them to struggle and relapse. You know.
Is it strange, Mason, that professionally, I mean, there's been professional addiction treatment people for a while, that we're kind of just getting to this place where we're starting to figure it out?
I don't even know if we're there,
I
you
know,
know, because honestly, and a lot of stuff gets so recycled too. Like, I mean, I'm to pull back the curtain a little bit. I'm doing more like inner child stuff that I never thought I'd be doing with people in the therapy room, because I'm a pretty systemic guy. I like to see families and couples and like relationships. And so to do like inner child work, I mean, that is deep viewing, and that's coming back. That's not new. Inner child work is not new, no matter what social media leads you to believe. Inner child work is not new. It's coming back. And I was just thinking about Don Clifton, and Dr. Clifton was an American psychologist in the 60s who was famous for saying, he's kind of like one of the fathers of positive psychology, and he would always say, what if instead of looking at what was wrong with people, which is what psychology was for up to that point, what if we looked really closely at what was going right with people?
Yeah.
That strength, and I mean, Clifton that's where like the Gallup and StrengthsFinder 2.0 came from eventually. But I mean, that whole vein of thinking, I mean, it's solution focused at the end of the day. If you want to be, but I love doing this with people where the first question I ask them in a session is, okay, what went really well with you this week?
Yeah.
Or with you guys, if it's a family, what went really well with everyone this week?
It really kind of bugs me that we have treatment programs and therapists who are so focused on sobriety that we at times will kick people out of treatment for the very symptom of the reason why they're there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's like if I've got somebody that's coming to see me in my practice because they're struggling with depression, and they come in and see me, and I said, hey man, how was your week? And they said, no, I was depressed
Could not
like
get
2
out
out
of
of 5 days. I couldn't get out of bed. And I say, well, that's not going to work. You got to
You gotta
back
go.
to treatment.
And I think
That
there's
doesn't make any sense.
I think there's a matter of safety too. Like, I mean, I know this is like the rap that a lot of sober living, and I have to talk patients and clients out of this all the time. This thinking where it's like, I hate sober living communities because they just will like kick you out. And I always have to say, well, you just got to remember that like there's 15 other people who are trying to not do the thing that you brought into the house. That's a major violation, man. You just put a lot of other people at risk. That's really unfair. You made an agreement. Come on, work with them. And also there's other places you can go. They want to help you. But I think what happens when people have when I always say getting squirrely, there's a big difference. And we talk to people all the time about like, think about how you're functioning when there's a chemical in your body. I mean, that's the main problem with that, because we have so many people who are like, I didn't think that the alcohol was really causing that much of a problem. I mean, we think about high functioning people. I mean, there's people who come through Arcadia Trails all the time who are really high functioning on whatever they're using. And so we always have to say, think about how much better you'd be functioning if you didn't have that in your body. You need to give yourself a chance to see what you're capable of. Yeah. Which is a strengths-focused approach. I mean, that idea of like, think about how well you're doing without that. That's kind of where you want to be. I mean, let's not pigeonhole that one day out of the 365. I mean, I love that idea. Think of all of the potential you have. You're doing great things. Let's get back on. and I think that's a shift in the field right now. Is like
Yeah.
this whole thing of like starting back on day one. It really hurts.
Somebody asked a question via Facebook comment, so I want to get that and get you guys' opinion on it. Thanks for the questions. As a reminder, you can text your questions to the number in the title of the video. We're monitoring that live right now as we speak. That's what live means. For those of you who didn't know. So the question in the Facebook comments was, what's the difference, if there is one, between backsliding, relapse, and I'll add in, because you guys have both used different terminologies, getting squirrely, and having a slip?
I've talked a lot, Kurt.
Well, I'm thinking about my loved ones, and he's mentioned this about some other members of some of his support groups about, we talked about relapse, but is there a relapse in thinking? Can you relapse without using substances? Or you start going back to some of your old behaviors that worked for you while you're, abusing substances?
Are you asking?
I'm asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
100%. And, if you want to get into the semantics of it all, relapse, that's like the big book terminology. That's going back to, the Holy Scriptures of AA. It's the High Holy Book. Relapse is the word. At Arcadia Trails, we try to use the word recurrence.
Right.
Because that's more of that disease model. And when you say that, it kind of pulls the morality off of it. I try to stay away from words as much as I can. I say getting squirrely because, we all get squirrely.
Yeah.
I get unfocused. I get doing something else. I got squirrely this morning, and I realized I wasn't listening to any of the podcasts that I had turned on. I realized I had to turn it off. My anxiety was just getting squirrely, for somebody who suffers from substance use disorder, if they get really squirrely, suddenly they're thinking, that relapsing thinking, if we want to use the word relapse, we call it relapse drift. There may be some thinking patterns that are really easy to get into, and that's a lot of neurobiology, but just the difference of words, if we pull the morality off of it and sanitize a little bit, we just look at it different. That's why I like the word recurrence.
Yeah. I hadn't heard recurrence. That's good. I like that. When it comes to, semantics are difficult. So for me, I think that whatever community, like micro community that you're operating in, your family, your support group, your support system, your church, whoever it is that you're relying on, I think you probably should talk about those things to make sure that you're both saying the same things and meaning the same things.
Yeah. Language is important.
Language is super important, and we don't do a good enough job at talking those things through, I think, with our support systems. But, by definition, recurrence or relapse is ingesting chemicals when you've been chemical free, right? It's as simple as that. So for me, I think that whole conversation starts way back when we start talking about recovery. And what is recovery? I'll just talk about me for a few minutes because I don't want to speak for other professional therapists. For me, I've made a big shift in my practice in how I think about recovery, talk about recovery, and how I want my clients to think and talk about recovery. Because if your definition of recovery is just abstinence, then you're probably not the right fit in my practice, because that shouldn't be your goal. If that's your goal, there are therapists that can do that. That's cool. That's not me. Because I've come to realize whether somebody's hang up is alcohol or drugs or pornography or sex or just being a butthole, like the problem is we all fall victim to our own humanity, and we don't know how to deal with our pain, and we isolate, and we're not honest with people, and that condition stretches well beyond drug and alcohol use for me. And so I've got a really broad and deep view of what I find recovery to be. And so that means that I also have a really broad and deep view of what I find relapse to be, because if that's my definition of recovery, then relapse is far more than just ingesting chemical. And I usually talk about it in terms of if I'm actually working with somebody who their primary share might have been drug or alcohol. I kind of talk about it in terms of moving towards relapse, right? Along this continuum that, yeah, you didn't ingest any chemicals this week, but you're engaged in a whole bunch of unhealthy thinking patterns and behavior
You're
patterns.
not evolving.
If you're not moving
Yeah.
towards health and wellness, you're moving the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And
how-
that's a
yeah.
bad week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing in my mind is, you know, if we take chemicals out of the equation entirely, this is a whole different conversation because, you know, it's about how stories get told of our lives because recovery just means like to get something back and restored, to restore something. So, I mean, my goodness, that could be anything, you know, to get your family back, to get your general well-being back. I mean, to get your parenthood back, your identity as a parent back. You know,
Or even to get your kids back.
to get your kids back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to define recovery when you get that general, but I mean, this is something, and this is what I've observed in just my private practice. If I get away from the treatment center view of it, something I've noticed in my private practice, I mean, there's a state of emergency right now in my mind. This is just anecdotal. I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
There's a state of emergency right now of family members who are so high on themselves. They don't want to say, "Hey, loved one that cares about me and wants to have a better relationship with me, I know you want me to come to therapy, but I don't think I need that. And so I reject your notion that I need to come get help with you."
Yeah.
You know, and we're talking about married couples. I mean, there have been women sitting in my office going, "I have asked my husband like 100 times, and he won't come. He won't even go to a step study of any kind."
Yeah.
And it's like, man, why not? Because if you do, you're admitting there's something wrong with you. No, I think what you're saying is, I'm not dead yet, and I've got stuff to improve on. I could be better than I am right now. And I don't think it's any different. I mean, when it comes to somebody who's using chemicals, that's a little bit more tangible. You know, being better than I am right now is going to mean I don't have a chemical dependency issue that I'm dealing with day to day. I'm not shaking on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm not homeless. I'm not sweating. You know, whatever those things are.
I think it's really important for every person to identify for themselves what recovery would mean for them.
Yeah.
And I think that we can work with that. I can in my
Oh,
practice. There's a lot of people that wouldn't. No, if sobriety's not on your list, then you're out. If complete abstinence isn't on your list, then I'm not going to work with you. And I don't. If that's where people are at, that's great. And if that's that person's definition of recovery, if that person says, "Hey, in order for me to be healthy and well, I have to be abstinent from all chemicals," then I want to support that person in their definition of that recovery. And I think that keeps people from falling into that trap, right? Because, and I was thinking about this in terms of marriage, and I'm like, if your definition of recovery or a healthy marriage is different from mine, I could do damage to my relationship by trying to fit into your box.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we have to do the same thing with people's recovery coming out of treatment. And I think that can take some pressure off of parents, because it's not up to you, mom and dad, to define what recovery means for your young person. It's up to you to define what recovery means for you in your own enabling and your own codependency and your own health and wellness. Let your young person define for them what recovery means, and then help them be successful at that.
That's very, very good. And I think, you know, for me tonight, if I could stress one thing, is as a parent of a loved one, I had to have my own recovery, and I didn't realize I needed to work on me.
Right.
I thought it was my son or daughter or family member's problem. And maybe you guys see this a lot in your practice. It's their problem. But I didn't realize how it had affected me. Slowly, gradually, it changed me and my wife, molded us. We were manipulated into behaving in a way that we didn't feel good about or comfortable with.
Yeah.
And like you said about your couples work, I'll tell a lot of parents that come, the parents helping parents, don't forget to focus on each other and support each other. If there's spouses involved, and you're both worried about a loved one, because it does affect. I mean, it's the hardest thing I've ever personally gone through, and that's a lot of strain on relationships.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to ask you a really vulnerable question. You don't have to answer
Okay.
it. Were there times that it was so stressful that you wondered if your family was going to survive that, if your marriage was going to survive that?
no, but I realized it was quite a test and quite a strain, and our journey was we realized that we needed help and support. So our family started meeting with a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, loved one, and my wife and I, and that was a point of acceptance. I realized there was a problem with my loved one and myself. That, how do our counselors say, Kirk, you're going to have to change. You have to change how you parent.
Let go and let Kurt.
Yeah. So that was kind of an aha moment that, okay, there is a problem. Accept that problem and be willing to accept the help and guidance of professionals. So,
Is your son or daughter doing well now?
yes, they have several years of recovery / sobriety. So,
If they weren't doing well, would you and your wife still be okay?
we would be okay. We would still, be more concerned. But I know our loved one is in the best place for them. They're in a place, I say best place, their recovery community, their support groups, their sponsorship. Yeah, even though they live several hundred miles away from us now, we're probably as close as we've ever been, thanks to both of us working on ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when parents can find their own health and wellness and their own recovery, like you guys were talking about, it increases their chances of survival, even if things don't improve for their loved one.
It's been my experience or my observation through those that come to our meetings. Back when we met in person was when the family is actively engaged also in a recovery community, and their loved one is also doing that, I see much better outcomes.
Yeah.
For the loved one and the family. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just what's the term, a body shop mentality where
Yeah.
drop my kid off and fix him and I'll come pick
Yeah.
him up in a while.
My
So,
kid's all messed up. Fix him. I'll be back in a month.
exactly.
The picture I keep getting in my head, if you haven't seen the movie Beautiful Boy, you gotta watch. A hard movie to watch. It came out in 2014. Have you ever seen Beautiful Boy?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, Steve Carell, Timothy Chalamet, great.
I have not.
Oh, you got to see this movie. There's a great scene, and I show it a lot.
New podcast idea.
Great.
We should have watch parties for these movies
Yeah.
and then talk about them.
Listen, a lot. I use a lot of movies. I do a lot of narrative therapy with
Yeah,
movies
I know.
and stuff.
It's great.
Storytelling, yeah.
Yeah.
But Beautiful Boy is really good because it's a true story about David Sheff, American author and journalist, and his son Nick Sheff, who is an author. But there's a great scene right in the middle of that movie, and they do such a good job. And there's no spoilers built into this, but the son character, who is the dependent, has been out. He's had some sobriety, like over 400 days of continuous sobriety, and he's been out for the evening, supposedly at a meeting, right? And I love the way they build this scene, the way that they wrote the scene, because they did it. They really get into the mentality of how everybody feels, right? Because if you are a person who suffers from substance use disorder and is watching this, you're going, I know what he probably is doing, And he walks in, and the dad says, "Hey, you're kind of late." And he says, "Yeah, I know. We went to my sponsor's meeting afterward, or my sponsor's house after the meeting, and yada yada yada." And the addict is hearing this, going, He practiced this in the car all the way home. He's lying. And the parent or figure who watches this scene is going, this parent's worried sick. You know,
Yeah.
this parent has just stayed up waiting on him, and he's got over 400 days. So he says, would you be okay to first he says, you didn't have a phone, your phone? Well, my phone was dead. Well, would you be okay
Likely story.
yeah, he says, would you,
Heard that one before.
would you be okay to take a drug test? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And so he goes and he gets the cup, and he comes back, and then he feels like he's got to explain it, and you feel that codependent tug
Yeah.
to say, hey, we trust you, we just need some proof. And there's some
We
conflict
trust you, but we
there.
don't really trust you.
Yeah, there's some conflict there. And then they don't even, like, the scene doesn't even play out in such a way that you find out whether or not, yes, he was positive for alcohol or whatever it was.
Well, that's frustrating.
They do it beautifully, because it's like, it causes you to go, well, I don't know. Well, I mean, who's to say what happened there? No. And so what I'd love to do is show that scene and have people. And listen, I've had people watch the entire movie and go, oh, but he was positive. Don't you remember? They show it. It was a positive drug test. They showed it.
Yeah.
And I always have to say, no, they didn't show it. They didn't show it. Or don't you remember? I mean, he was at that meeting. I mean, he was right at that meeting right before, in that scene before. He was at a meeting. He was telling the truth. You saw it. And I'm always like, they didn't show that. And it's interesting how people will complete the story mentally.
Yeah, in their own mind.
So, I mean, that kind of is that projection going on. So,
I think more than anything, this is just a really complicated disease.
yeah, it's a disease. I mean, if it weren't a disease, it wouldn't be complicated.
True.
I don't think, in my mind, that's
Yeah.
one man's opinion.
Well, I mean, it's clear it's a disease. It's clear it's complicated. Kirk, as a parent, like, where do you even start to navigate something? Like, I'm thinking about parents who are like, oh, I heard about this Parents Helping Parents thing. My kid's actively using. I'm going to watch it. And now they're like,
Now this guy is rattling
it's
off
like we
about
like,
this movie.
we like opened the fire hose on them, you know, and they're trying
Yeah.
to get something, you know, take something away. And I'm thinking, man, from a parent perspective, when you're just right in the thicket of all this, like, how do you even begin to sort out what the heck's going on?
A lot of parents, and myself included, struggled with that. It's as you mentioned, the fire hose of information. It's just overwhelming. Too much information. I'd say once again, go back, find and follow and believe in a professional in the field to help guide you through this. Parents Helping Parents is a great resource, and will share experience. And there's other support groups. We're all a piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, having the guidance of a licensed alcohol and drug counselor helped point me in the direction I needed to go, and help find our loved one a resource. Things on the internet, I don't know. There's a lot of great information, but
Yeah, there's a lot of shit
be,
too.
be very careful with the internet. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
it's
it's kind of like for me, when I feel ill and going to WebMD, I'm just going to freak myself out.
Yeah.
So
You know that ride at the carnival where they spin and then the bottom falls out and you're just floating?
yeah. I think that's really great advice, is find someone or some group in your local community that you trust and talk to them.
yeah, you got to have faith and trust in your professional, and you've got to go to a support group that fits. I don't know how else to describe it. You'll probably figure it out the first 5 or 10 minutes you're in a room with, whether it be Families Anonymous, an Al-Anon group, or a Chance to Change as a parent support group also. So
Yeah, Hope is Alive has one.
Hope is Alive,
I'm sure.
Finding
Hope is Alive.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do they have one in every city where they host a home?
In most cities, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Finding Hope started almost like right as soon as it was
I
like.
mean,
Right.
there's just a unique power and it's hard to describe the love and support you get when you find a group that fits with you and your needs, and just acceptance. And
It really normalizes the experience.
yeah, there's people that look
Which-
just like us. Yeah.
Is crucial, man. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with somebody that's been struggling with something, And just them knowing that, like, hey, this isn't a completely abnormal thing. There are lots of people in the world who periodically think about suicide. It's not just you.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Really? I'm not the only one that thinks about that? Like, oh, okay. You know, oh, there's lots of people that struggle with alcohol and drug related issues.
They're not terminally unique.
Yeah, no. We're no, none of us are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the magical thing about that broad view of recovery
Mm-hmm.
is it means that anybody can work towards change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it means all of us have something in some sort of change that we can work towards.
And it's successful. I did this with a guy today who was writing his story, and he had been working on it for a while, and he read the whole thing. His voice was just shaking the whole time. It was just me. I mean, and we've got a good relationship.
Sure.
But his voice shook the whole time, mostly knowing that he's got to read this in front of people soon.
Yeah.
And, I was like, how did that feel to do that? And he said, it feels humiliating. And I just suddenly, my mind exploded. I started thinking about these words: humiliated, humility, humanity, human. And even if he felt like he was humiliated by his story, if he were to kind of turn that and go, okay, this is, because his definition of humility was to focus on myself less. And I said, I think it's just like the full recognition of your humanness and being able to walk in and go, this is my human story. And he felt a lot of shame. And I was like, yeah, man, I listened to your whole story. And at a lot of moments in your life, you really blew it.
Yeah.
You did. I mean, you had a lot of opportunities for this to get better, and it did not get better. You really blew it a lot of times. But humility is just like, I'm human. This is a story of my humanness told to other humans, and that makes humanity more possible. It kind of evaporates the contempt out of the room or the need for one-upsmanship.
Yeah.
And we're kind of, I mean, even though our stories are all different, we're really kind of all the same in that way. That's how I think support groups work. Is we have very different stories, but we're really kind of all the same.
Yeah.
Or similar.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Kirk, you kind of said this earlier, but I want to revisit it as we're kind of moving towards maybe wrapping up. If parents are listening and you had an opportunity to say, hey, this is what I really want you to hear from me tonight, what would that be?
That your expectations of how your loved one should act or respond to offers of help or treatment or whatever resources you may be throwing at them, don't be upset if those offers of help are maybe ignored or not even applied. Don't get your expectations are just that. I realize that my expectations on how my loved one should react was mine and not theirs. And I used to think with holidays and special occasions in our family that our loved one could have a good day or control the substance use or mental health problem. And I realized that those diseases do not care what the calendar says. So with Christmas just coming up this week, don't let yourself get too beat up. Just be happy if your loved one is with you for Christmas, because a lot of families, that's not the case. They don't know where their loved one's at or what's going on with them. So
there's almost something therapeutic about having a little bit of a pessimistic anticipation and then overshooting that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, they do this every year. It's probably going to be pretty bad. And if they only drink mildly, then it's like, hey, that was better.
Yeah. Yep. Mason, your turn. A family member's listening, maybe somebody who's struggling with substances is listening. What's one thing you really want them to hear?
You may not be able to get them to do anything. And so if you're able to get your loved one into a treatment center, great. Now you go to therapy. If you are not able to convince your family member or talk them into it or even kind of help get their mindset turned around in any way where they get that moment of clarity and they go, if they're not willing to go to therapy. Go see a therapist. This is one of like my main missions right now is to see therapy be as normal as anything else you would do for your health and wellness.
Yeah.
I hired a dietitian back in September to get my diet online. So what? A lot of people hire dietitians. For some reason, the therapy office is still like this, like parents are telling the school that their kid has a doctor's appointment and they're pulling them out for a therapy appointment.
Yeah.
I'm like, just say they're seeing a therapist. It's like the
Yeah.
dentist, man. Go see a therapist. If you can't, if your family member or if your loved one is not willing to do anything right now for themselves,
Yep.
do something for yourself. See a therapist. It's a good thing.
Yep. 100%.
Practicing self-care, even
Big.
if your loved one's still struggling, you can almost, in a way, model your
Oh my
self-care.
gosh, yes, yeah.
And as hard as it is, if your loved one's struggling, you can still have a good life.
Yeah.
You can still be
Yeah.
happy and
If
have
they
a
kn-
fulfilled
yeah.
life. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat and say that it's easy because you're
Right.
going to a support group and your
Mhm.
son or daughter is struggling. But as a parent, if you're just a mess and your loved one does ask for help and you haven't taken care of yourself to the point you can't be supportive, whether it be emotionally or
Mhm.
financially or whatever your situation may
Yeah.
be. So
I
take,
never
take care of yourself, take care of your marriage.
I never want anyone to mishear me on this. Yeah, you can model going to therapy and they may go as a result, but they may never go.
Yep.
They may never do it. I hope that they do, but they may not ever go to see a therapist or go to treatment. But you can see a therapist and you should.
Yep.
And I think as a parent, you will learn that you can't control them, as we say, but we can respond in a healthier, more productive way for everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Truth.
Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
That was
Thanks
quick.
for, almost 53 minutes.
It went quick.
It goes quick. I call this room the time machine for that very
Mhm,
reason.
Yeah.
That's why I can sit in here and record a podcast for 2 hours and 20 minutes and go,
Mhm.
I gotta go to the
Where's this
bathroom
going?
real bad.
Where's this song going?
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Kirk. Thanks for the work that you do with Parents Helping Parents. Thanks for your vulnerability and sharing your story. If you want more information about Parents Helping Parents, visit them on the web, www.parentshelpingparents.info. I almost said the wrong thing. As many times as I've said it, info. There's phone numbers on there to reach out, warm lines to reach out and talk with parents. There's all kinds of information. Get at it. To get in touch with Mason in the Oklahoma City Metro, visit him on the web at
You can follow me on Instagram at Mason
on Instagram.
dot lmft dot hypnosis, and if you want to see me in person, you can just send me a direct message there. I'm also on Facebook, Mason P. Phillips LMFT. Google me and go to my website. That's easy too. If your loved one is like, I will go to treatment tomorrow, and you want Arcadia Trails to be the place, you can call 216-2500. They will take your call.
Excellent. If there's ever anything I can do for you, send me a message on social media. You can get in touch with me at Therapy with Derek. DEREK.
I'm doing it right now.
You're doing it right now? I think you already follow me. That's a beautiful picture of your family. You got a beautiful family, man.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, have a wonderful Christmas. If you spent your Monday with us, thank you. There's 1,000 other things you could have done. We were glad you spent it with us. If you're watching this after the fact, recorded, thanks for listening. We hope you're doing well. We hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season. If you don't celebrate Christmas, if you're into Hanukkah or all the other kinds of holidays that are out there, whatever's Festivus for the rest of us, whatever it is, whatever your bag is, we hope it's great. That's the bottom line. Gentlemen, thank you guys. We will see everybody after the first of the year.